Hello, Facebook friends, citizens of America and the planet. We're trying again to see if we have audio. If we don't, we're going to go over to Skype. So let me know if you are hearing this. Put a comment out there that you can hear me. Yes, yay, I see a yay. All right, awesome. Okay, thanks for hanging in there. That's kind of what we're doing these days. We're hanging in there, and we are just going to persist until we prevail. The resistance is what it's all about, and that's what this conversation is about. I don't know if you noticed, but last week's Fireside chat was about Trump's first 100 days, 100 days of assault on democracy, and it was about our 100 days of resistance and about the strength and triumph of our fight back, which continues. Interestingly, that Facebook chat was going viral in about 12 hours. The next morning, it had reached almost 2 million viewers and had been seen by tens of thousands. And what do you think happened? It got taken down. I don't know if you noticed, but it was disappeared. It was removed illegally, apparently. Facebook had no reason to do it. They had no cause. They can take you down if you violated copyright, if you're using somebody's graphics or music, which of course we weren't. And if they take you down for some reason, they have to tell you. So they had no notice, no reason given. They haven't responded. Who knows whether it was something funny on Facebook or whether it was some action of trolls or hackers or what, but you know, it's yet another sign that some forces out there are a little bit worried about the resistance that's building. So this is a good sign, and this is a sign that we got to keep this up. So we're going to have this conversation again about Trump's first 100 days, about the assault on our democracy, on human rights, on planet peace, security, on the economic, racial, gender justice around the planet, and a conversation also about our resistance. So like this conversation, share it. Let's get the word out that we are standing up, we are fighting back, and we are getting stronger. Because that really is the message, I think, of this 100 days. We are under assault. This is really the culmination of what's been going on for many years, decades, in fact, this assault under both Democrats and Republicans, this war on immigrants, war on African Americans, the mass incarceration complex begun really under Bill Clinton, as was, in fact, the militarization of the border and the recruiting of local police to the war on immigrants, the Wall Street bailouts, the deregulation, again begun under Bill Clinton and carried on under Obama as well. This is a struggle under both political parties, but it has gone ballistic under Donald Trump. And again, remember, most people voting for Donald Trump were not for Donald Trump. They were voting largely against Hillary Clinton in casting their vote for Donald Trump, which is, again, drives home that the solution here is not simply to go back to the neoliberal catastrophe under the Democrats. That's not the solution. Going backwards is not the solution. Going forwards is the solution. That is to real policies that serve working people and women and immigrants and the indigenous tribes and the LGBT community, and which protect the environment and our economy and social justice. This is about standing up for us all. Under Donald Trump, we've seen the appointment of billionaires, bigots, and bankers. And just to look at, for example, the appointments to the members of the cabinet, which are largely people who are dedicated to the destruction of the cabinet branches that they've been appointed to, like Betsy DeVos, the billionaire proponent of privatizing education, like Jeff Sessions, the opponent of civil rights and of racial justice, and all those things and voting rights and climate justice, all those things that he is supposed to be defending as the Attorney General. He is very much representing the opposite of. So Donald Trump made all these appointments, but let's remember that we are standing up against many of those people and have succeeded in pushing them back, even from prohibiting his chosen Secretary of Labor, Andrew Puzder, a real opponent of working people, an opponent of the protection of workers through living wages, the protection against wage theft, the protection against sexual harassment at the workplace. We defeated him. And likewise, we have beaten back Michael Flynn, who was one of the security appointments, and the resistance has also forced Stephen Bannon to retreat from his position as one of Trump's leading advisors. He's basically on the outs right now. Let me mention also that Fox News has had to back away from some of their chief sexual predators, thanks very much, I think, to the power of women standing up, beginning on the very first day of the Trump administration with the huge demonstrations and rallies for women's rights and women's justice and against sexual abuse and predation. So, we have, in the court of public opinion, we have pushed, I think, and congratulate all of you for helping to remove Roger Ailes from the head position at Fox, as well as O'Reilly. Keep standing up and keep pushing. In the realm of legislation as well, we were able to push back against Trump's health care, which was really wealth care, not health care, and keep the heat on. Call your congressmen and your senators, if you haven't already, and tell them to stay the course and to resist Trump's 2.0 on his health care bill. They're going to try again, perhaps tomorrow, and it's very close. It's important that we stop the takedown of the Affordable Care Act. Not to defend the Affordable Care Act, but it needs to be replaced by Medicare for All that will provide everyone with health care as a human right. Everyone in, no one out, covered from head to toe, cradle to grave. Your pharmaceuticals, your mental health care, your hearing aid, your eyeglasses, your reproductive health care, everything should be covered. We need to go forward on health care, not backwards. This latest health care replacement that they're trying to ram through the House of Representatives now, through Congress, does not protect the people with pre-existing conditions. And already there are tens of thousands of people who die from underinsurance and uninsurance every year. So to dismantle Obamacare without replacing it with health care for everyone right now means those numbers are going to go way up. And, this is a death sentence that the House will be voting on tomorrow, and it's important that we hold their feet to the fire. Working people who voted for Donald Trump do not want to lose their health care coverage. So we need to keep standing up on that, because we have beaten them back on Trump's wealth care, and we need to continue standing up on that. Likewise, the budget measure that was just passed is, it's very much a defeat for the things that Trump said he was going to ram through in the budget, and that includes the border wall, which is a disaster for human rights, for immigrant rights. It just forces people to go through more dangerous terrain and for more lives to be lost on the border. The way to address the crisis of migration is by stopping those things that are causing the refugee crisis in the first place. That means we need to redo NAFTA in a way that works for working people on both sides of the border. It means that we need to end the war on drugs. We need to legalize marijuana. We should not be putting anyone in jail for the use of the private and recreational use of substances, particularly marijuana, which is far less dangerous than alcohol and tobacco, which are perfectly legal. And we should likewise be regulating and legalizing and taxing cannabis. But drug use and abuse should be treated as a public health problem. In doing so, we stop the murder, the killing, the cartels, the murderous cartels, which have killed over 100,000 people in Mexico alone in the last several years. So we can fix this migration crisis by addressing the root causes, and that includes the incredible economic injustice that we have had a hand in, particularly through these global trade agreements, which are great for bankers and for the 1%, and which are horrible for working people, for farmers, peasants, etc., for everyday people on both sides of the border. So we can fix that, and we did fight back so that instead of tens of billions of dollars going into this wasteful and dangerous border militarization, there are $0 actually now in this latest budget proposal that is being passed this week. So that was a huge victory on that account. And remember, when Donald Trump talks about increasing the military, which is already bankrupting us and making us less secure, not more secure, that 9% increase, some $50-some billion increase in the military budget, which is already bankrupting us, already costing us half of our discretionary budget and almost half of your income tax going into these wars for oil that have no end. When he talks about increasing that budget, he hasn't done it yet, okay? This is talk, and this is what we need to be standing up to stop. And remember, in the special elections that have taken place for Congress over the last couple of weeks, the Republicans are beginning to pay an incredible price for the danger and destruction and that's being, the havoc that's being wreaked by this administration. So remember this, the Republicans are already at war with each other, and when they see the incredible price that they're going to be paying at the polls, you're going to see people abandoning Donald Trump right and left. So his days may very well be numbered. Remember that people in South Korea stood up, got out by the millions, and marched every Saturday night. They had their candlelight march, and eventually they impeached their very conservative president in South Korea. Guatemala did the same thing a couple of years ago. So we could see Donald Trump winding up in a very similar position. Remember, under Richard Nixon, one of the most conservative, corrupt, authoritarian presidents that we've had up until now, we did remarkable things. We brought the troops home from Vietnam. We enacted women's right to choose under a very conservative Supreme Court. We developed the EPA, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and OSHA to protect workers' health and safety in the workplace. We did that under this very conservative president because we knew our lives were on the line. Our brothers, largely, particularly our brothers of color and Latino brothers, were being sent to die to Vietnam. And we knew our lives were at risk back in the 60s and the 70s. We knew our lives were at risk, whether it was women from coat hanger backroom abortions, or in particular our brothers being sent to die in Vietnam. We knew our lives were on the line, so we got out like our lives depended on it. I think we've come full circle, and we know that our lives, once again, are very much on the line right now. So we're out there strong, and remember that the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We do have the power, and we are standing up like our lives depend on it, to say no to the lesser evil and to say yes for the greater good. That's what we're here for. Last comment I'm going to make, and then I'm going to open it up to you. Last point here is that we can have a voting system that allows us to unleash our values, to align our values with our votes. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your values in your votes, because if we can't vote for what we want, how exactly are we ever going to get it? So we need to be able to vote for what it is and who it is that we support. You know, in this last election, these were the most two disliked mainstream candidates, disliked and untrusted in our history. And people had their way, had they been able to hear about other choices, had they been able to vote for Bernie Sanders, had he not been sabotaged by the Democratic Party, he would be the president right now. Had people been able to hear that there was another campaign that provided the same solutions as Bernie Sanders, and in fact went further, we might have a very different president right now. So remember, ranked choice voting is that solution. We're working on a referendum here in Massachusetts to create ranked choice voting statewide. The state of Maine just enacted it in the last election, and many states right now are following in suit to create a voting system that lets us really vote our values, that allows us to stand up and to bring that moral compass to our democracy. Democracy cannot simply be a question of who do you hate the most. Democracy needs to be about our values, about our vision forward. And that's what we can do when we create ranked choice voting. You can rank your choices, and if your first choice loses, your vote is reassigned to your second choice, so that your vote is never lost, it's never thrown away, it never inadvertently helps someone who is your worst nightmare. This creates a voting system that really reflects the will of us, the voters. So I encourage you to keep standing up. Let's keep fighting, and like this conversation and share it. Let's get the word out again, like last week when this was going viral as a word about our resistance. Let's get that word out again so that our brothers and sisters in struggle out there on the front lines of the pipeline fights, of the indigenous battles, our brothers and sisters who are in court now still fighting the fight to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline and the many other pipelines invading our communities around the country. Our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, our immigrant brothers and sisters. And by the way, we just won a wonderful victory in the court of law. By standing up in the court of public opinion, we embolden the court of law, which is what we just did recently, where the court said to Donald Trump that he could not stop the federal funds from going to sanctuary cities. So we have preserved the right of sanctuary cities in the same way that, thanks to your demonstration and to your conviction and your courage, we also, through the courts, stopped the Muslim ban from prohibiting people from coming to this country basically on the basis of religion, which is a violation of the Constitution. So we are going strong, and our job is to keep that up and to reject this propaganda of powerlessness, and to know that these 100 days of assault from an abusive executive branch that has totally gone off the rails, that we are standing up with 100 days of resistance. We've got our work cut out for us. This is just the beginning. We are going strong. I'm going to turn to your questions now, and let's be sure to send in your comments your thoughts and your connections. And I am looking for these connections, and for some reason my computer is not finding them online. So let me take some here off of my my cell phone. William Pitt is saying, we don't need to tax our way to single payer, nor to have a guaranteed income and a humane retirement. So there are many ways that we can fund critical things that we need, and thank you for that comment. So one of the ways is through what's called quantitative easing, or there are other terms for this as well. Quantitative easing means that the government basically has the power, has the constitutional right to create money, and can do so. There's a lot of political controversy around it, but it is a right that is established in the Constitution. It's also how our presidents through history have done some difficult things. It's how Abraham Lincoln helped to pay for the war by creating, I believe it was called greenbacks, essentially a currency that was funded basically by a social contract. That is one of the ways that we can meet these costs. But another way, it's really important to point out that single payer does not actually cost us anything more than what we are paying right now. Single payer simply puts our dollars that are getting diverted into paper pushing, red tape, and bureaucracy, and to exorbitant CEO salaries. Instead, those dollars go into healthcare itself. And instead of paying for all this tracking of complicated insurance schemes, instead that money just goes into healthcare. Thank you for that, William. So let me take another one here. All right. What's our take on the first 100 days of resistance? Are we going to keep fighting for a better future? Let me ask you all to weigh in on that. I've given a few comments, and I'll just say that, like so many of you, I too feel like this isn't something we can walk away from. This is the world that we live in, and let's keep it going. Abdul Jones says, I want to concentrate my energy on the debates. We are still working here. Okay. I may have lost you there for a moment. But let me answer that question. How can we push forward on debates? So let me just say that we are in court now to try to open up the debates. We very much need, I think, a social movement to be pushing for open debates as well. And if you connect through either my webpage, Jill2016.com, and let us know, or through our Facebook page, let us know that you would like to connect on the debates, and we hope to help get that organized soon. What can we do to push for ranked choice voting, and can you talk about Flint? And that's from Daniel Velez saying, let's talk about Flint. Let me jump to that question first. Recently, a report was just put out mentioning that there are hundreds, I think even thousands of other cities across the country that have average lead levels that are even higher than Flint. So Flint is an incredible assault on human rights and on environmental rights, on our water rights. And remember, it happened under a government that was not elected. This was a special appointed commission that replaced elected government because the government was going bankrupt, and the governor of Michigan just put in some replacements. So this was really a violation of basic democratic principles. And we see what happens as a result when we have elected officials who are not accountable to the voters. They basically did what they thought was going to save money. And that essentially switched the water supply. And the people in Flint now are not only getting their water shut off, their toxic water, but they're also being booted out of their homes because they haven't paid their water bills. So this is just this is an outrage against social and economic and ecological justice, and you know, it makes the point here, as we're seeing so many other communities discover that they too have polluted water. It brings home that we cannot be regulating after the fact. We knew at the time that lead was being installed in pipes, was being painted onto homes, a generation of housing, several generations of housing, and was being emitted from our cars. We knew lead was toxic, and it should not have been allowed to have been emitted in the first place. That's why we need regulatory agencies from the get-go that are protecting people, not protecting profits of big corporations whose lobbyists go through the revolving door and then wind up sitting on these committees. That's why in the last election it was a major issue to clean up our regulatory commissions, including the DEA, the drug and the Food and Drug Association, and the EPA as well. We need to make sure that our agencies are representing us. Many people have been asking, let me see if I can find this here, about the DNC lawsuit. So let me just close that down. So I think that's a reference to the lawsuit suing the debate commission. I believe that's what that was referring to. And that lawsuit is still in process. That lawsuit basically says that the Democratic and Republican parties do not have a right to censor our debates. Right now, our debate commission is run basically by the two big corporate parties. And their mission is to silence political opposition, but political opposition is, is essential. That is what democracy is about. The people who said in the last election and after that last election that opposition parties should just go away, that we were the so-called spoilers in the election. I think it's really important to remember that that we are, in fact, very much fighting for our right as voters to have more voices and more choices. The solution to a democracy on life support is not to silence voices of political opposition. It's to open up our voting system so that you don't have to vote for the lesser evil, so that we have a ranked choice voting system. And Mel just clarified for me, the DNC lawsuit is about voters, I believe voters' contributions that objected, I believe, to the DNC sabotaging Bernie. So I am not completely up to speed on this lawsuit, but I believe it's about the DNC sabotage of Bernie. And I'd say stay tuned and let's see where that goes. It's clear that the DNC has not come around, and in spite of the enormous support for Bernie and the outcry against the manipulation of the press, the smear campaigns that were run against Bernie, in spite of the Dem exiters and the promise that Bernie was going to change the Democratic Party, we're not exactly seeing the Democratic Party change. And what we're seeing is Tom Perez going around the country with Bernie and attempting to sort of hijack the Bernie opposition and say that, the DNC is a whole new ballgame. But I think we've been there, we've done that. The DNC refused to to ban corporate contributions. They rejected all of the reform proposals put before it. So it's time, I think, to leave the DNC behind and to move forward with a green, with a Dem exit and a green enter. Let me take a few more questions here. So a shout out from Robert Anthony Parobachek saying, come to Cleveland. I'm in Lakewood, an extremely progressive town. I wish you would come and visit a major city in Ohio. I will try to get there in the future. Tom Wiley says, where's the anti-war movement? We are concerned about climate. Where are our voices on the anti-war movement? I'll just say that I had a wonderful honor to stand with Veterans for Peace yesterday at an incredible event at a May Day, actually this was on Monday, at a May Day meetup for movement unity that brought us together from the anti-deportation movement, the anti-war movement, the anti-pipeline movement, and also the anti-prohibition, pro-legalization, anti-racist war on drugs movement. We all got together and said, wow, we are connected. We need to be working together to expand this movement. And the anti-war movement is a really critical part of it. So I want to give a big shout out for all of those movements I just named, but especially for Veterans for Peace and for Pat Scanlon in particular, who's an amazing singer, songwriter who shared some really wonderful songs. You can go to Pat Scanlon Music, I believe, patscanlonmusic.org, or you can just Google him. He's got a great song called Extremists for Peace, because they discovered that Veterans for Peace was being investigated secretly by, I don't know whether it was the CIA or the NSA or the local cops, but they were after Veterans for Peace as extremists for peace, as if peace was extreme. So yes, this is all about lifting up our voices together as an anti-war movement, as a anti-mass incarceration movement, as an anti-climate destruction movement, because all of these movements really, and a pro-immigrant rights movement, all these movements are really joined together, and together we need to end fascism, end endless war, put an end to the climate catastrophe, put an end to the refugee crisis. These essentially are all part of the same convergent crisis, and you can tell who's here now visiting. The Politicat is back. And yes, we need to stand together, and let's keep doing that. And I'm going to try to catch another couple questions. Opening the debates. What kind of doctor are you? Okay, so I am an internist, actually. That's like being a general doctor for adults. I'm actually in the process of renewing my medical license right now here in Massachusetts. But now, the main thing I do is I practice, instead of clinical medicine, right now I'm practicing political medicine because it's the mother of all illnesses. And let's see, Mel is sending me some questions here, but I'm losing them on my iPhone. They don't show up for very long. Mel, if you can post them on the Google Doc, that would be awesome. And if not, let's see if I can pick a few other here. Pick up a few more from the stream. Okay, Christy Sumner-Rue says, what would you say to someone who... So that question was, what would you say to someone who never considered the Green Party before, but is considering it now? I'd say, this is a great time to break up with an abusive political relationship that keeps promising you that things are going to get better, but it never does. And in fact, let me just acknowledge that many people who voted Green were people who would have voted for Donald Trump because they had already broken up with the Democratic Party. I think people are really hungry now for a politics of integrity, for a new kind of politics that really stands up for us, that's not funded by the big banks and the fossil fuel giants and the war profiteers. So the Green Party is not funded by corporate money. We're not funded by lobbyists. We're funded by everyday people like you, and that's who we stand up for. So I'd say, the Green Party is really where it's at. It's time to leave behind the abusive political relationships and start building a real politics that we need and we deserve. Paula Thompson says, "Why were you sitting at Putin's table?" All right, so let's be clear about this, because I've said this like many times and the press just loves this issue. This is like the lame smear campaign. This is the smear campaign where there is no there there. They keep showing this picture of me at that table with Putin, with Flynn, also with diplomats from Germany, from the Czech Republic. I was at a conference in Moscow that was being held by RT. RT, unfortunately, is the place where U.S. dissidents go to get covered because our corporate media won't give the peace community a voice. And in fact, I was at this conference in order to promote the peace offensive. That was my statement that Russia was following in the catastrophic footsteps of U.S. Middle East policy by bombing Syria, which it had just begun to do at the time. That was my message. I was not there to kiss up to authoritarians and to make the point that the U.S. and Russia were both going down the absolutely wrong path, and that we needed to do a 180 and work together to bring a ceasefire to the Middle East, to bring a weapons embargo to all sides of the conflict, and to put a freeze on the bank accounts of those countries that continue to fund terrorist extremism. I was not there alone. I was there with many advocates from the peace movement, including Tom Hartman, Jesse Ventura, Max Blumenthal, and several others. Ray McGovern, one of the stalwarts of the peace movement and of the civil liberties movement. Many of us were there to deliver a similar message. So when you see that lame smear campaign, know that this is just a part of the personal attacks, because the political establishment is feeling a little bit threatened by the fact that there is a principled resistance that people are hungering for. Hillary Clinton has just come back into circulation, basically saying that the FBI and the Russians made her lose, instead of saying, well, it was the contents of those WikiLeaks that people were reacting to, actually, and the FBI cast a whole lot of doubts itself. It's not okay to just blame political opposition and try to silence political opposition. And in fact, Hillary Clinton didn't say that. She didn't, although others have. She wasn't saying that. She was blaming some other things. But I think it's really important that the Democrats, take a look inside and, look at their failings that have been driving voters to vote for Donald Trump. So Hillary Clinton is back saying that she's part of the resistance. So there's resistance and there's resistance. What we're talking about here is real and deep resistance that's standing up for everyday people, for an America and a world that works for all of us. Let's take one more question here, again about the DNC lawsuit. All right, Franco Gonzalez saying Hillary hasn't changed at all. Carrie Jones saying the Dems don't have hearts. Jeremy Coffett saying, Jill, what's your take on the draft Bernie for a People's Party? What I'd say is good luck. a lot of us have tried to draft Bernie for many years. The Green Party's been appealing to Bernie for many years, and Bernie's answer has always been that he doesn't believe in third parties, even though he's sort of a member of a third party, but he's always said that he thinks running more than 2 candidates for president is a very dangerous thing to do, which kind of locks us into more of the same. So we already have a People's Party, and I think those who are saying we have to draft Bernie for a People's Party are participating in this, what shall we say, in this effort to kind of turn away from the work that so many people have done to create an independent third party. We will all get smeared. We all get dragged through the mud for being political opponents. So it's not like you just create a new third party and you're going to be able to do it and not get smeared. No, you're going to get smeared too. You're also going to be called a spoiler. Back at the time of the abolition campaigns to end slavery, the abolitionists were called spoilers for running political parties like the Republicans, which were a new independent third party at that time. And they built on and merged with, actually, the other anti-slavery parties. We need to work together, and there are many of us who've been out here laying the groundwork and building up this independent People's Party. It includes the Greens, the Labor Party, the socialist parties. We all need to work together. That's what we've been doing in the so-called Left Elect Coalition, which is working to do exactly that. And those who think that you have to just throw away all that work and start and create a new party, I'm sorry, you're in for a rude awakening. It takes about a generation to create a new party. If you're going to get funded by billionaires, yeah, maybe you can start it in a few years, but then you're funded by billionaires and you're right back where you started. If it's a People's Party, it takes a lot of grassroots work, and that's what we're doing together. That's why it's time to go green. That's why it's time to Dem exit. I'd say come along, Bernie. Or more important than that, let's just get to work. Let's get to work, because when we start winning more races, and we are winning local races, but we need to start winning our legislative races and congressional races and more mayors and more city councils. As we start winning those races, we are going to see a bandwagon effect, and we're going to see a lot of people come along who kind of are hanging back at this point and just kind of going along with what's not working. We're out of time. As I think so many people know, the clock is ticking on climate. The clock is ticking on a generation of young people locked in debt. The clock is ticking on the immigrants who are facing deportation. The clock is ticking on the next Wall Street meltdown. The clock is ticking on health care that we cannot afford, even under the Affordable Care Act. Tens of thousands of people are dying every year. The clock is ticking even while we are the wealthiest nation on the planet in all of human history. We can do this. We do have the power to create an America and a world that works for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. I urge you to like this conversation, share this conversation. The resistance is going strong. We are the resistance, and I will see you back here next week for more discussion and more action and more strategy for how we go forward and we take back the future that we deserve. Thank you all so much. Have a good night, and remember, green news is good news. See y'all next week. Take care.